Issue 10, page 13, which is our cap and trade expenditure plan.
Yes, in the May revision, we are proposing $2.2 billion in expenditures from the cap and trade revenues. This really mostly follows along the framework that was implemented last year in conjunction with the legislature, including funding for the high-speed rail, state transit assistance, transportation, intercity rail capital program, strategic growth council, affordable housing, and sustainable communities, ongoing continuously appropriated funds. There's also some targeted expenditures that are follow along the lines of investments that were made in last year's Budget Act. There are a few key differences that I'll highlight. Some of these differences that we put in the May revision are really directly related to the state grappling with a very difficult drought, and many of these investments reduce greenhouse gases, but also help to conserve water, which will make the state make California a more resilient place for the long term if the drought continues, especially. Also, just want to say a little bit about the overall framework that we approached the $2.2 billion. We did leave a $500 million reserve in the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. We think that is a prudent reserve given the uncertainty in the market for these cap and trade allowances going forward. So we did reserve $500 million, and that's really, I think, the main difference between our approach and the approach that was discussed by the Senate and recommended here today. A few things about our expenditures. Few items that were in our drought executive order. There's $40 million for increased efficiency programs at DWR and Food and Ag to reduce water use in the agricultural sector and also in urban settings. Also $30 million for the Energy Commission for a new water energy technology program that's really going to be designed in bringing innovative technologies into the market that can benefit the state right now to help in saving water and energy. Also, $30 million for rebate programs to replace inefficient water and energy using appliances, as well as $8 million for the Department of General Services to also retrofit our own state infrastructures that also use water, and some of which are in very difficult drought-hit areas of the Central Valley. We also have some additional investments in wetland and carbon sequestration in the Delta, $40 million, along with some investments at the University of California and California State University system to also help to reduce energy usage at those campuses. And then finally, we have a new initiative called Carbon Rich Healthy Soils Initiative, and $20 million to demonstrate projects that increase carbon in soil.
Thank you, Ms. Bosler. Leo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members.
If you could walk us through the Senate plan, please. And then also, once you do that, we'll have a few questions relative to the governor's proposal.
Sure. So the Senate plan adopts an expenditure amount of $2.7 billion. That's roughly $500 million more than the administration's May revision proposal. Some of the key differences are an additional $25 million for agricultural, energy, and operational efficiency activities. There's $50 million less for waste diversion activities in CalRecycle. It would be $15 million more for water and energy efficiency activities in programs that would be administered by the California Energy Commission and the Water Board. $25 million in financing in funds for financing program for energy efficiency projects. And the key difference is, from a budgetary perspective, I believe, is $500 million for a new program, a disproportionately affected communities program, which I understand would allocate funding to counties based on the share of disadvantaged communities within that county. And those are the key differences, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. So with regard to the cap and trade program itself, we've seen it grow from a year ago from about $1 billion to now we're projecting $2.7 billion. From a revenue perspective, what is assumed in the governor's May revision is roughly $1.4 billion in revenue in the current year and $2 billion in revenues in the budget year. Now, we've provided some revenue estimates and scenarios. Those revenue scenarios are in our view, is within a reasonable range of revenue estimates, but towards the lower end of what we feel is likely. And do you have projections for budget year +1?
Well, we do not have any projections right now, but we would be happy to work with staff on trying to put some numbers together.
The reason I ask is just relative to the suggestion that whether a reserve of any size is appropriate. Do you have a thought on that?
I mean, I think there are a couple different factors to consider. One is the revenue estimates themselves and how conservative to be in those estimates, and the other is the reserve. And there's a balancing act between those two in some cases.
So the major driver in the increase in the past year, of course, was that transportation fuels came under the cap.
That's correct.
Anything else about to come under the cap, or any other forces that might see it continue to grow in any way?
I think there's quite a bit of uncertainty around just the price of the allowances that will be offered. There's a lot of different factors that go into what that market price is and the amount of revenue that the state will receive for the number of allowances that it sells. Our assumptions and our assumptions associated with the low revenue scenario, which is essentially in line with what the governor proposed, assumes that those prices continue at the minimum amount that the state sells them for.
Just the whole nature of the operations and mechanics of a cap and trade program, of course, revisiting the original purpose of it, thank you, Senator Pavley, in AB 32, which is to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So as we continue to succeed in lowering our greenhouse gas emissions, how does that impact the marketplace for the credits?
I think it sort of depends on where the money is being spent and where the emissions are being reduced. We've talked about the issue of sort of reducing emissions within the capped sector and from those entities that are subject to the cap and trade program. And to the extent you're reducing emissions from those entities, it may place a downward pressure on the allowance prices. To the extent you're reducing emissions or affecting emissions outside of that capped sector, then there would be no direct impact associated on the allowance prices.
So we had heard in our EQ committee recently that because we've been so successful, both it's a combination of our renewable portfolio standard and the early inclusion of the energy sector under cap and trade, that as a percentage of total greenhouse gas emissions, transportation now, which originally had represented 36 to 40%, might not be by now 50% of our total greenhouse gas emissions, as it now just begins to come under the cap. So what will remain outside the cap?
So I think within the cap will be largely electricity, industrial sector, and transportation fuels. Outside of the cap are some of the areas that are targeted with these spending proposals, emissions from changes in land use, emissions associated with wetlands and forestry. There could be smaller emitters that they don't meet sort of the threshold for being included in the cap and trade program.
Very good. Senator Wilk, did you want to fill in any blanks here?
No, I think we had a tremendous amount of discussion, as you can see by I assume that's public comment lining up. This is a tremendously exciting program, but there are a lot of demands and a lot of wishes, but it's important to really focus on what Senator Pavley has told us, and which we all should understand, that the programs that should be funded here have to do with the reduction of greenhouse gases, and that is the only way that these programs can be justified. So the effort was made to really look carefully at these areas and make sure that there was a real opportunity for that, a real likelihood of that, and then make certain that there is competitive funding that would be available for those good projects to rise to the top and really have an impact. That's the bottom line. So with that.
Thank you, Senator Wolf. Senator Pavley.
Comments, and Senator Wilk's absolutely right. It's a mitigation fee for greenhouse gas pollution and then reinvestment to reduce GHGs to meet our targets under AB 32. And we're well on the way to meeting our 2020 targets. We've seen a lot of success in this program, especially, and you alluded to it, Senator Leno, in energy efficiency, whether it's appliances or building standards. Our kilowatt hours might be a little more, but our bills are lower than competitive states all around us. And so we're doing a good job there. Renewable energy, amazing, over 20% now comes from renewables, which will help balance the problem during this drought for those of you who rely on hydroelectric power. We actually have now a broader diversity of energy, and we're doing it with clean energy. We're seeing a lot of good reports, and this market signal that we've been sending out has provided over $30 billion of capital money coming into California since 2006. Someone mentioned a new program in here. I wanted to clarify that, and that was the $500 million for the disadvantaged communities, disproportionately affected communities. What this was about is, as you know, 535 passed Senator DeLeon's bill, requiring 25% of the expenditures go to disadvantaged communities. I made the recommendation to him that it made more sense to me to, instead of debating each little program and what percentage of each program connects with disadvantaged communities, and that it made sense to put 25% in that pot. That's where that 500 came from. So instead of looking at clean freight, and for the first 3 miles down the 710 corridor, it affects disadvantaged communities. The next 10 miles, it's some other community that's more middle class. This is a lot simpler, and then we'll give them a really good way to focus in on key things that could be done to make a difference in people's lives, not only lowering the cost of their energy bill, but mitigating the impacts of climate change. And so maybe it's weatherization in many homes, multiple dwelling. So this has been a good program, requires a lot of oversight by the legislature, the Air Resources Board, and the public, but it is a fee based on mitigation. And other states are continuously, if you're following 11 states and provinces and states in Mexico on the subnational level are working together. There was an auction held yesterday. Not sure if the LAO's office knows about that. We're still, carbon prices are staying relatively on target, and we're putting a price on target, but there will be another 190 million for this quarter coming in.
Very good. So to clarify, the $500 million for the local climate action disproportionately affected communities, that serves the purpose of SB 535.
Correct.
Doesn't duplicate it. It serves the purpose of.
Absolutely.
Right. And I agree with you. That's a much smarter, cleaner, effective way to meet the goal of 535.
Right. Instead of debating what percentage of each program.
Certainly. Senator Wolk.
Just one other area that we were very careful to focus on, and that is the importance of technical assistance. And rather than, well, I think it's really up to us how we want to do that, but there should be technical assistance available in that 40%, or actually for the 40% that is within the of the discretionary money in each of the areas. So whether that's a separate item, we thought perhaps just language that allowed for technical assistance in each of the categories made a lot of sense.
Thank you, Senator.
And if I could just add 2 other sort of newer things, because they're major amounts of money that the legislature, we can talk about it in greater depth as the budget process moves forward and people negotiate on the final budget package. $350 million for low carbon transportation. That isn't just alternative fuels, but a real investment in programs like biofuels and biomethane. So we create some competitiveness in the marketplace as far as fuel consumption, while also looking at lower carbon fuels. I think this will be really smart investment that could be done in many people's districts. This makeup of programs is respective of broad regional differences and everyone's districts, what different priorities there are, and hopefully that reflects it. And the other maybe large expenditure that perhaps wasn't in the governor's thing is down near the bottom, $105 million for water and energy efficiency, really looking at smarter regional solutions with the co-benefit of reducing energy expenditure by also tackling problems associated with the drought. So perhaps instead of transporting water 300 miles, long distance away, 20% of all of the energy we use in the state is moving and treating and heating water. Doesn't it make sense to invest in regional water solutions like stormwater capture and reuse, recycled water, cleaning up your groundwater basins? And I think this could be perfect timing to accomplish multiple objectives, and that's the purpose of these expenditures, whether it's jobs or cleaning up our air or dealing with the drought. Those are all consistent with also reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
And another benefit of the $350 million for low-carbon transportation is the benefit of a more competitive marketplace for fuels.
And that should put, exactly right. We don't have that right now, as we well know with the refineries, right? This will bring some competition to the marketplace. Yeah. So one fuel sector can't game the motorists of our state.
Very good. Senator Wolk, I'll take your comments as a motion.
And then I'll be quiet. Two other areas, just because we're going to have a lot of public comment about this. Both for agriculture and forestry, we recognize, as did the governor, the important role that agriculture and urban and forestry can play in reducing greenhouse gases. So that was added in. With that, I would be glad to move the item, the Senate cap and trade expenditure.
All right. Okay, we do have a motion. And before we get to public comment, I think there are a few people, my eyesight's getting dim this late in the day. No other comments from the committee? Please step forward for public comment. Again, please, if you could, keep it within a minute.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Pablo Garza with the Nature Conservancy, also making comments on behalf of Defenders of Wildlife. We're also part of the Natural and Working Lands Coalition and Sustainable Communities for All coalitions, which can support the points outlined in letters submitted to this committee. Overall, we're generally supportive of the Senate's proposal and really appreciate the investments in urban forestry, wetlands, and working lands. These will reduce greenhouse gas emissions while providing numerous co-benefits, and also are unique in that they will also pull carbon out of the atmosphere and play a really important role in helping us achieve our long-term climate goals. An issue that we really appreciate the concern raised by staff that was discussed yesterday in sub 2 about the use of GGRF dollars for mitigation. And I think we got a clear answer from the Department of Fish and Wildlife that's not the intent. Heartened to see that, and we just suggest that maybe that is possible trailer bill language, just to clarify that. That was also in Proposition 1, would be supportive of that. On the forestry piece in the Senate's proposal, we appreciate some funding for the Wildlife Conservation Board. We are heartened again to see the $65 million for wetlands restoration. I think there might maybe a more explicit role for the Delta Conservancy is in order. And we really love the concept of the $500 million for disproportionately affected communities, as the committee was discussing, and are supportive of that. Look forward to more detail going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Paul Mason with the Pacific Forest Trust, also with the same Natural and Working Lands Coalition. I'll build on what Pablo had said, agree wholeheartedly with all of those points, and that natural and working land investments really help us both reduce greenhouse gases and prepare for the change that's coming. I'm going to focus in on the forestry elements, and in particular, all of the groups that are following on here are very pleased to see the Senate's proposal to move some of the activity over to the Wildlife Conservation Board, which has a long history of effective conservation out there on the ground, has a legislative advisory committee, a strategic plan, a competitive process. It's the right place to implement the on-the-ground activities that are doing permanent conservation through easements or acquisitions. That said, there is also a role for the Department of Forestry to continue to have a forest health sort of program that has been a complicated area to actually get up and running. I very much appreciate the attention that Senator Pavley and others have paid to making sure that we have accurate metrics and quantification that we're actually achieving greenhouse gas reductions. It is possible, though, and I think we should maintain a role for the Department of Forestry on that topic.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members. Rico Mastrodonato with the Trust for Public Land, also with the Natural and Working Lands Coalition. Want to flag some opportunities for GHG reduction benefits from green infrastructure investments in our hardscaped urban environments. And we all know that green projects sequester carbon, but projects like our Avalon Green Alley project in Senator Mitchell's district and our Bodecker Park project in your district, Senator Leno, along with the 93 acres we protected in the LA River, multiply GHG benefits by inducing active transportation and cooling the urban heat islands so we reduce our energy consumption, all while providing impressive co-benefits. We're very supportive and want to keep all of the recommended investments to urban forestry through CAL FIRE, but the mounting evidence of impacts of climate change to the urban environment, there are other compelling investments yet to be made in green infrastructure that reduce GHGs and directly benefit disadvantaged communities.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Chuck Mills with California Relief, also with the Natural Working Lands Coalition. Mirror a lot of the comments from Mr. Mastrodonato, really strongly supportive of the Senate recommendation to retain the urban and community forestry program with CAL FIRE. This aligns with the actions taken in the Assembly and also the administration. So thank you for your effort to minimize that particular part of debate during conference. And in addition, would align myself with the Natural Working Lands Coalition regarding the opportunities for additional green infrastructure, perhaps through the disproportionately affected programs that was mentioned by Senator Pavley. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mills.
Good afternoon, Adam Coten with the California Climate and Agriculture Network. I believe the last member of the Natural Working Lands Coalition in attendance here today. As has been discussed, agriculture has a unique opportunity to store carbon in farmland and ranchland soils. And to that end, we support the administration's proposal for the Healthy Soils Initiative. And we recognize that the Senate proposal acknowledges agricultural carbon sequestration. We hope that it will clarify that that effort would support growers in their on-farm efforts as the administration's Healthy Soils Initiative does. We're also pleased to see that the Senate has included some funding for farmland protection strategies. We strongly urge you to consider a dedicated funding pool for that program equal to 10% of the total amount allocated to the Strategic Growth Council. That program's $5 million allocation last year was vastly oversubscribed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, members, Josh Malone on behalf of a few groups. I'll rattle through them really quickly. Echo what what Adam just said on behalf of the Community Alliance with Family Farmers, Compost Coalition, and Stop Waste. We understand the idea of shifting away from the healthy soils as a separate budget item. We're assuming, though, that that means the 25 additional million that was put into the ag efficiency is going to cover those issues that were in the governor's proposal for healthy soils. If not, we urge that they do that. And to add a bit of specificity, Senator Walker's got an outstanding bill that outlines many of the things we believe we should be funded out of that 25 million bipartisan support. So we urge that you use that as the language to back that up. Community Alliance for Family Farmers strongly supports the allocation of that Strategic Growth Fund money, 10% or so, to that. You just mentioned the word, rather vague term, some money goes there, so we'd like that to be nailed down at 10%. And also we'd like to get clarification, not here, but at some point, that the sweep money, the ag efficiency money, is still in the budget, or will be still in the budget. Finally,
thank you, Mr. Malone.
Yes.
Thank you.
Last, on the U.S. Green Building Council, very positive news. Thank you for all your support for energy efficiency and water efficiency. And finally, on the
Mr. Malone,
Cal Recycle,
thank you.
We worried about that loss of that $50 million. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Virginia Jameson with the American Farmland Trust in California, and we put out a study recently that shows that 58 times the greenhouse gases are emitted on average compared to when you convert ag land to urban uses. So this is, the SALC program is really vital for protecting ag land and reducing emissions. California, on average, has lost an average of 40,000 acres of ag land per year since the Department of Conservation started measuring that in 1984. That amounts to over 1 million acres at this time. So we would support the recommendation that 10% of strategic growth planned funds go to the Sustainable Ag Land Conservations Program. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jameson.
Good afternoon, Corey Bullis on behalf of Audubon, California, who is also a member of the Natural and Working Lands Coalition. I'd just like to align my comments with many of the previous speakers who are part of the coalition. We are generally supportive of the proposal, but we are especially supportive of funding for wetland restoration, as well as green infrastructure as it relates to local climate action. And we support the proposal to fund the Wildlife Conservation Board for forest and resource conservation. Would also just like to note that it's important to us as well that funding not be used for mitigation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bullis.
Hello, sharing members. Matthew Gannon here on behalf of the Big Sur Land Trust, Peninsula Open Space Trust, and the Santa Clara County Open Space Authority. I'd also like to align our comments with the previous speakers. We're generally in support of the overall proposal, very specifically in support of the Wildlife Conservation Board funds for forest and other land conservation activities. I'd also like to echo the comments from CalCan. We're in support of a specific dedicated funding pot for the Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation Program. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, Nick Lapis with Californians Against Waste. We were frankly surprised to see the recommendation to reduce CalRecycle's funding from the $60 million in the May revise to $10 million. We're not exactly sure why that recommendation was made. CalRecycle has the two most oversubscribed programs of any agency, and the funding that they've given out already has been more cost effective than programs from any other agency. So between the fact that they're the most oversubscribed and they're the most cost effective, it seems like a good candidate to increase, not decrease. And so we recommend going more along the route of the Assembly proposal, which is to actually increase that funding by $15 million. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lapis. And good point to remember, this will be going to conference.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Chuck Helgett, I represent Republic Services. I also am here in support of the Assembly version of the budget regarding healthy soils and the CalRecycle allocation of $60 million. Both will help the solid waste industry ensure productive and higher, better uses of organic materials.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Mark Fenstermaker on behalf of the Sonoma County Water Agency. Very pleased to see the proposal out of the Senate, in particular the increased funding for water and energy efficiency programs. Hoping to see that some of this funding would be available for direct install. Our direct install program in Sonoma County has seen tremendous reductions both in water use as well as energy use. Also, on the point of the $500 million for the disproportionately affected communities, Sonoma County, we have some communities that do not align on the CalEnviro screen, but are disadvantaged in other areas, hoping that in the future we could access some of this funding as it becomes available. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fenstermaker.
Mr. Chair and members, Don Gilbert representing the Bay Area Biosolids to Energy Coalition. The sergeant's passing out a letter from many of your colleagues. One or two of you has signed as well. We're looking for an augmentation of $12 million to the CalRecycle cap and trade budget there for matching funds to construct a biosolids to clean energy facility. This is crucial for the Bay Area and actually the state to figure out what to do with the resource we all contribute to, biosolids. Current options for land applications are diminishing. We're looking for the highest and best use. This is cutting edge technology, no incineration. It's very expensive going in, just like solar used to be. We need state help. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert.
Bill McGavin with the Coalition for Clean Air and the SB 535 Coalition. All three proposals, the governors, the Senate, the Assembly, are very positive. As you go to conference, we urge you to look favorably on the Assembly proposals for transit passes, active transportation, and outreach to disadvantaged communities. And the Senate proposal for $500 million for disproportionately affected communities sounds promising. We look forward to hearing more details about that. We definitely need to make more investments in the communities that are the most vulnerable to climate change. And along those lines, we would urge you to make sure that some of the drought-related programs are spent in those most disadvantaged communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGavin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Mike Dillon representing the California Association of Sanitation Agencies, the large wastewater agencies. I would echo the comments of a couple of others relating to the reduction of funding under CalRecycle for waste diversion. Many of our agencies are building or want to build facilities that will take organic waste from restaurants into their digesters. This does two things. It generates additional energy and allows them to get off the grid And secondly, it reduces the amount of organic waste going to landfill. So we would urge increasing that funding. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dillon.
Good afternoon, Cynthia Corey with the California Farm Bureau. We just wanted to make several points. The first being that we're very supportive of the money that's being given to the Ag Energy program. This is a dairy digester program. It has to do with methane. So the addition of $25 million for sequestration was a little confusing. If that's the money that, because there's no sequestration in the dairy digester program. The money that's being joined together on the water energy programs, if the sweep money is going to be taken away from CDFA, we don't want to support that. This is an on-farm water energy efficient program. I know that was discussion yesterday and concern about the possibility that there was increased acreage that could happen with this money. I want to assure you that that does not happen. And I'd like to help facilitate any understanding of what the requirements are on that program. And the last being the Healthy Soils Initiative, the Wolf bill, and there's a Levine bill that gives details to this program. We're very supportive of this program. We think this is the best opportunity we've seen in a long time for actual reductions on farms and ranches, and we're very supportive of that. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Corey.
Hi, Helen Roth-Dowden from Nexus Water. It's an on-site water reuse company, and we support the governors with the augmentations made by the Senate, particularly the water energy efficiency program, and hope you'll adopt that.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Phoebe Seaton with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. We're an organization based in the San Joaquin Valley, Coachella Valley, and we also echo Bill McGavern's request that you consider the money discussed in Assembly Sub 3 yesterday for outreach to disadvantaged communities to ensure robust participation in this program, especially in the most isolated communities throughout the state. Look forward to seeing the development of this $500 million. We are concerned that this will represent a constriction rather than an expansion of strategic investments in disadvantaged communities, but we look forward to seeing how that evolves.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Louis Brown on behalf of the California Biodiesel Alliance. We appreciate the Senate staff recommendations and the indications of support for drop-in replacement transportation biofuels, especially those that are produced here in California. The biodiesel industry alone has the ability to almost double its production with support from the state of California. That will allow the low carbon fuel standard and other programs to be more successful, less reliant on out-of-state fuels. That will create jobs, economic benefits, as well as environmental benefits. We look forward to working with you on the details. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Michael Bocadoro with West Coast Advisors on behalf of the Ag Energy Consumers Association, very supportive of the increase to $50 million in the ag energy and operational efficiency. This does need clarification because historically this has been the program that funds dairy digesters. And like Ms. Corey, we're concerned about the language dealing with emphasis on sequestration. Digesters destroy methane. They're probably one of the most cost-effective programs the state can use GGRF funds for because the bang for the buck is massive. It's all methane and it's all destroyed. And it's a short-lived climate pollutant. So we're going to need to get clarification if this program's being expanded, how, and make sure that it is continued to be focused on dairy digesters, because that is a completely area of need that we really need to increase funding, particularly in light of Senate Bill 605, Laura, last year, dealing with short-lived climate pollutants. Thank you.
Very helpful. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, Senators. I'm Dave Snyder with California Bicycle Coalition. The California Household Transportation Survey says there are 2 million bike trips every day in California. That's 1 million more than there were a decade ago. Most of those are for transportation, having a huge impact on greenhouse gas reductions. For that reason, we support the Assembly's proposal to increase the active transportation program by $25 million, as well as their proposal to support transit passes for similar reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder.
Hello, Senator Joshua Stark with Transform, an organization that works on equitable and sustainable land use transportation policy. I held my comments on the road usage charge, so it was worth getting blessed by Senator Leno. Thank you very much. We're here in support. The three proposals that we see, the governors, the Senates, and the Assemblies, are proposal from the subcommittee yesterday are all positive directions. Speaking on behalf of Transform, the Sustainable Communities for All Coalition, the American Lung Association of California, and Housing California, we are particularly in support of the $25 million augmentation to the active transportation program using the GGRF. We feel that the nexus is clear. As well as $25 million to transit pass programs. Transit pass programs for colleges and universities, for example, have resulted, according to research by Professor Shoup, in increases in from 70% to 200% in ridership. And we think it's another clear nexus. Transit passes and active transportation projects are all eligible under POTS, but we feel that there needs to be a very clear vision and direction to support Caltrans' great new strategic management plan strategic plan that calls for doubling walking and tripling biking in the next 5 years, and doing that by increasing their program in the in funding to the active transportation program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.